Welcome. Good evening. The solutions to problems of conspiracy and conspiracy theory are obvious, and I'm going to give them to you. This is Retraice segment number 37. It's Tuesday, November 1st, 2022 at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific. Retraice is about what's going on out there. I said I was going to talk about solutions. Did I say that? The last segment was about problems of conspiracy theory and conspiracy at the same time. And I think the solutions to one are the solutions to the other. We're talking about gold and silver, lead bullets, and then after that, anything goes. Those are the solutions. What do I mean? Okay, so first of all, conspiracy is, let's think of it as attacks on our shared world. And then conspiracy theory is attacks on our shared world model. So people conspiring to take over the whatever is an attack on our shared world. People conspiring to make us think that people are conspiring to attack or to take over the whatever. That's an attack on our world model. That's an attack on the mental side of our world. Solutions. Gold and silver. E.O. Wilson says the gold and silver of science is original discovery. I think that's a good way of thinking about what motivates real scientists. And why do we talk about scientists? Well, they're just one profession, but they're an important one in this whole figuring out what's going on out there business. So the first thing we need to do is align the incentives, or we need to look only where incentives are aligned. We need to look at the work being done by people who have gold and silver to be gained by getting the right answer. And then as sort of a pinching motion on that, we want to focus only on things that are knowable, things that, like, we can't just say, okay, this person is incentivized. We know this person has the incentive to find gold and silver. They're a scientist who's trying to make an original discovery about nature. They're a journalist trying to make an original discovery about the goings-on in City Hall. We also need to focus on the things that they tell us that can be somehow triangulated by other sources or other pieces of evidence. So focus on what is knowable. We need a standard of evidence, or we need different standards of evidence depending on the context. And we need to measure belief in degrees. I'm pulling ideas from Horwich's Probability and Evidence, a fantastic little book. Measure belief in degree. You don't just believe something. Belief is a matter of degree. We can't forget that. Never completely trust a single source and avoid such situations because sometimes maybe you have to. If you were crossing a bridge, you wouldn't want to just trust someone telling you that the bridge is sturdy and secure. You would want at least some other pieces of evidence, maybe. So, okay, scientists, it's easy. They're trying to make discoveries about nature. Journalists, discoveries about the goings-on in a more worldly world. Law enforcement officers, I'm not really sure what incentivizes them. Lawyers, convictions and acquittals. Politicians, bureaucrats, government agents, I don't know. We'd have to think it through. All of these professions, in addition to many others, and non-professions, all have their gold and silver. But they also have ulterior motives. We can always say, oh, well, there should be an incentive here, but there's a stronger ulterior motive. That's always possible. Okay, so gold and silver, incentive and tests, pinch our evidence and information and beliefs about the world between those two pinchers. Lead bullets. So where we can't find good incentives and good tests for evidence of our beliefs or lack thereof, we need people, we need standards, and we need tools. We need people, lots of eyes on something. How many are on conspiracy right now? Not many. It's sort of only eyes that you wouldn't really want to trust, people who have no public, credentialed background. There's no way to find out whether they're nuts or they're somebody serious. And that's also a matter of shifting eyes that are currently not on whatever thing you're worried about, either an actual conspiracy or conspiracy theory. Shifting eyes away from whatever they are focused on. There are a lot of eyeballs out there focused on a lot of things that are not important, and even amongst the things that are important, very few of them are focused on things that would fall into the rubric of conspiracy. Then we need standards, an absolute top-notch standard of evidence, including custody of evidence. Again, I go back to Horwich, but evidence it's when you're usually looking at text on a page. I mean, that's not. I just read. Oh darn it! I'm gonna have to find this now. Oh yeah, it was in the New York Times. Some guy spent like years of his life, read I think 100,000 papers, discovering basically what he called a Photoshop problem in science and scientific publishing, and he found a lot of photos that were like stretched or compressed or flipped around to make it look like in these published papers that they had photographs of things, microscopic things or plant and animal things or whatever. And he figured out that, using photo transformations, he could prove that these were actually falsified photos. And there's the whole reproduction crisis in science. So again, custody of evidence, standards of evidence, these things are lead bullets. We need an absolute top-notch standard of reasoning. Think about Anthony Weston. Think about Richard Feynman on science, strategic intelligence. There's a dozen authors on strategic intelligence, things like espionage, and then philosophy. Everything from philosophy to mathematics. I mean, the standards of reasoning are the utmost and essential. And just constantly asking questions like Yudkowsky's. What do you think you know? And why do you think you know it? I think that's a good way of summing it all up. Finally, we need trustable tools. Recently, Sue Halpern for The New Yorker, I think, interviewed Alex Halderman, who is a election voting machine computer science expert. And he says this. Basically, he makes the argument that we need risk-limiting audits. We can't trust these machines. He's been able to hack them for decades, and people don't update software or replace the machines that are hackable. I'm quoting him now, what a risk-limiting audit does is it has people go and look at the original, hopefully hand-marked paper ballots, and you look at enough of them to rule out with high probability the possibility that the computer outcome is wrong. A risk-limiting audit lets you use technology to count quickly without having to blindly trust that technology to get the right answer. That's what I mean by trustable tools. I realize the vast majority of us are not going to trust statistical anything because it takes some training in statistics to develop a sense of trust in it. But we shouldn't assume that that's not tractable. There was once a time when most people couldn't read, and then there was a time when most people could read but couldn't do math, and then there was a time when most people couldn't do math most people could do math but couldn't do computer coding, and it's going forward. So maybe we need to up our game in mathematics. Finally, I'll just sort of turn the whole thing on its head. Ken Thompson, famous computer programmer, Unix guy, C programming guy. He wrote a paper. He gave a talk called "Reflections on Trusting Trust." It was a Turing Alan Turing Award lecture. It was published in '84 in the Communications of the ACM. It was titled "On Reflections on Trusting Trust," and he basically, makes a short argument for these two statements. You can't trust code that you did not totally create yourself. That's sort of the moral of his story, he says. But perhaps it's more important to trust the people who wrote the software, wrote the code. That's quoting him. Okay, so trusting tools is more complicated than it sounds. Anything goes. These are methods. But we don't need methods. You can be against method. Feyerabend, we've already talked about the philosopher of science, anarchist philosopher of science, Feyerabend, arguing that method just offers less than it takes away in science. Not everything is science, of course. Not all inquiry is science. And also A to Z, Andreessen Horowitz, Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz wrote The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is a book about, running businesses or running startups, building startups. The hard thing about hard things is that there's no formula, there's no there's no prepared answer for the hard things. You have to sort of figure them out yourself. Those two things line up to me. Again, Feyerabend's against method, and then Horowitz is The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That's it. We've got amendments and corrections. We'll do them later. Retraice, retraice.com. References will be in the PDF notes. This is segment number 37. Next one's tomorrow, same time, 11 p.m., 8 Pacific. Signing off.